Thank you, Schoff-san. Thank you for the very comprehensive explanation about, especially for the economic security concept in U.S. Historically as well as right now, and also the issues and the problems or the challenges between the U.S. and Japan, how to nurture the more collaboration for the economic security. And your ideas, I personally very interested in. But we have several questions here, especially focusing on the security clearance. Of course, then, in order to deal with the national security issues, we should control the classified information as well, naturally. And also between the Japan and U.S., in order to deepen the discussions, we should create the more, treatment, how to treat the critical information between two countries. So in this regard, now in Japan, the economic security minister Takaichi Sensei is trying to submit new bill to the Diet about security clearance to secure the Japanese, information protections, information treatment. And if you have any ideas, how you evaluate the Japanese current security clearance efforts, and how it is important, and how it affect to the, you said, U.S.-Japan economic security alliance?
Sure. No, I think it's incredibly important. This has been an area in the traditional defense arena. I think Japan has made important advances on information security protection, and the designated state secrets law was a great advancement that was, I think, evaluated highly on the U.S. side, but there have been missing pieces to that system or the regime in Japan. One key piece, obviously, is how it applies to the private sector, not particularly just in a defense context, but in a broader economic security or security context. Cybersecurity is the most obvious area, I think, because when we were doing threat hunting and understood that critical infrastructure in Guam, for example, had been infected with malware from the Volt Typhoon, Volt Tornado or Volt Typhoon? I always get that mixed up. And the Five Eyes countries were working together to assess that issue and how bad was it. They contacted Japan only shortly before the announcement was made by Microsoft of that problem. See, in my mind, Japan should be an equal partner. Doesn't have to be a Five Eyes partner overall, but on economic security or other key areas of innovation, technology innovation, or in the sensitive areas of data, compromised data, or the technology to be able to know what China is doing through, or what certain companies are doing in terms of maintaining, this is a technical issue, but there have been studies that show TikTok and some other softwares continue to collect information even after the user thinks they've turned it off. So there's a whole kind of technology assessment of how data is being accessed, not to mention the cloud side and the AI side, all of which will require, I think, clearance levels to be able to truly share that information. So one key issue, I haven't seen the plan yet, but I understand it may have 2 tiers, which would be good because it doesn't all have to be one size fits all. But I would hope there's more of a sole designated authority for information security or the clearance system in Japan. Right now, there is no sole designated authority, that, as I understand it. In the U.S., we have the National Disclosure Policy Committee, the NDPC, is a multi-department, multi-agency body that has the final say on what is releasable, what is determines. So all the other stakeholders, the departments have their say. It's not one department that's in charge, but having that ability, and then the Defense Technology Security Administration, DTSA, is kind of the arms and legs of the NDPC. So I think within the cabinet office, you could create a tokubetsu no kikan, kind of an authority that would pull from the different ministries and agencies, National Police Agency, et cetera, in Japan, so that there is a sole designated authority, but you're still not changing so much the day-to-day operations of each of how the ministries are managing it. But that issue is a key issue for the U.S. in terms of equivalency, how its system works. So we need good coordination between the U.S. and Japan so that, we're not going to get a second chances at this probably. We need to make sure that this time around, when Japan creates this new security clearance approach, that the U.S. kind of already understands where it's going and agrees that, yes, this is, and it doesn't have to be the same. And the U.S. needs to be flexible as well. It just needs to be kind of an equivalent strength and capacity, and let Japan figure out the details on its own. So hopefully we can manage that.
Thank you. The next question is then especially just as you said about the concept of the economic security in Washington D.C. or the U.S. You said it's a kind of the fluctuating things. The question says the response of the U.S. government for economic security appears to be ad hoc and patchwork for him, for him or her. And also the other question. Other question says there are concerns that somewhat protectionist tendencies of the United States and public opinion that prioritize the development of domestic industries with the name of the economic security. So therefore the fluctuation and some kind of that protectionist tendencies provide some concern for the listeners. So how will you evaluate such areas? And also the one one question says that, for example, UK is creating quoted national risk register. National risk register. Does the United States create a national risk assessment report similar to the United Kingdom national risk register to maintain the not ad hoc one, but overall long-term strategies or the long-term risk assessment? How you respond to these kind of questions?
Yeah, no, I can agree. I can understand that view because as forward-leaning as the U.S. is and the U.S. government is on economic security, the authorities and the strategies are spread throughout the government. And so there is not a unified strategy. And this is part of what some of these new bills being put forth in Congress are trying to address. So I think the next year is actually going to be a critical year for us because it's too late in the Biden administration right now to change what they've been doing. And I don't see any new legislation is going to be passed this year during the election year. But I do think whether it's a new Biden administration or whether it's a new Trump administration, next year is the opportunity to kind of reshuffle the deck a little bit or assess what's been working okay on the economic security front and what has not been working sufficiently, and to maybe make some adjustments and move toward what you're talking about, this idea of a national strategy or risk assessment. I think, who does that? Will they be sufficiently funded to be able to do that? Are some of the critical questions. And maybe it's not all in one basket. Maybe you divide up kind of the economic security basket into some smaller areas of different expertise, and you give some leadership to those. But we do need to improve the way we handle this from a strategy point of view, and I think next year is key. The problem is, in my opinion, I'll put my political thoughts out there. I think if it's a Trump administration, it's going to be a very different approach than if it's a Biden administration in terms of the next year being a pivotal year. And I think it will be more dangerous, more disruptive, and not as productive. So I think I'm a little worried about going too far or overreacting. Now, maybe a new Trump administration would not be as, maybe there would be business concerns might rein them in or elsewhere, but that is a concern I have. But I think next year is key on that front. But the industrial policy piece, or this issue about protectionism, there's no doubt this is what I was talking about in the idea of some people are approaching economic security from a political point of view, which gets to protecting labor or protecting certain industries or certain geographic areas that they're concerned about. Others are looking at it more from a purely military point of view, or but from the economic point of view, if you think about the national economic benefit, then you would have less of a protectionist kind of industrial policy approach. But you're still going to have some of that, right? I mean, both the U.S. and Japan are incentivizing capacity building, new industries, production capacity, for the sake of supply chain diversification. And I think that's okay, especially if we coordinate it among friends and we're willing to say, yes, if you make these chips in your place and we'll make these chips over in our place, and if there's a problem, we'll make sure you get some of these chips, and if you make sure, almost like a currency swap agreement. So I think there are opportunities to deal with that, but the politics are going to be a constant fight on this front.
Yeah, interesting that politics, military, or the economic, or the national, or the concrete, the various interests is going on with regard to the economic security. But the concrete questions: how do you assess in that regard? How do you assess the buyout of the U.S. Steel by Nippon Steel in view of the economic security of the USA? Your personal view?
Yeah, no, my personal view is it's not an economic security concern, although some will portray it that way. The main problem with this deal right now is I think you have three key stakeholders in the U.S. on this front. One is U.S. Steel, and one is the Steelworkers Union, and the other is Cleveland-Cliffs, the other steel maker that before that had the higher bid or was trying to buy U.S. Steel. So the problem is 2 out of those 3 are trying to undermine the deal. On the steelworkers side, they're trying to at least get leverage for their negotiations with whoever buys U.S. Steel to get the best deal possible. And they're concerned about Japan's reputation as not being as supportive of labor unions, even though they've treated employees well in the United States and the automotive industry and elsewhere. So they're pushing against it and using the raising the political obstacles. Cleveland-Cliffs wants to kill the deal because they want that buyer to fall away and try to get U.S. Steel for a cheaper price. And in an election year right now, the Biden administration is paralyzed unless they get a change of heart by the steelworkers. The steelworkers are the key stakeholder to kind of work on. And I think Nippon Steel's visit to Washington was good, and as much outreach as they can do to the Steelworkers Union to reassure them, because I think from an economic security perspective, this will enhance America's steel making capacity, and we would expect new technologies, new investment, Japan's Nippon Steel's know-how to now become a part of the U.S. steel industry, the same way U.S. automotive industry benefited from Japan's investment in the United States on that front. So I think it's a good move, and unfortunately it's going to take longer. If Biden wins, I think this deal gets done just by kind of reassuring the steel workers, and then you've got two of the stakeholders, and the only complainer is Cleveland Cliffs, and you can dismiss that at that point. But we're probably going to have to wait until the election, and if Trump wins, I think he would. It's possible he would kill the deal. So but it's not an economic security concern, in my opinion.
Thank you. Going back to your proposal, the slides, the one question says, how would you describe the roles that NSS, NSC could play within the broadened version of the EPCC in your proposal? As not opposed, compared to what NSS and NSC are now doing as a control tower in economic security.
Right. So certainly, at least on the U.S. front, the NSC really has been trying to play the control tower role, but they do it through all the other departments and agencies, because they don't have the manpower or capacity. But I think on the technology front, what Tarun Chabra and his team have been doing is really a control tower approach. They're setting the tone, and they're negotiating with Congress to get the money and authorities to do certain things. But when it comes to net assessments, risk assessment, threat assessments, coordinating with allies, I mean, they can do a little bit, but it's really the State Department, the embassies, commerce. I mean, now we have CDC here in Japan. It's too much for the NSC to manage, but they do need to provide the thought leadership and the direction. But I don't even know if they can really be the strategy developer per se. So I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes something more of a council kind of arrangement where you're really pulling different ministries or departments and agencies together, and maybe the NSC is the chairperson of that council, but you have to have, the other stakeholders have to have a very prominent role, I would think, because they're the ones who have the money and the technology, the expertise to get things done.
Interesting that you mentioned about the risk assessment or some things. Next question is then, about that. If you were to name 3 major economic security risks for Japan in recent years, what would you think they are? Supply chain vulnerabilities, cybersecurity threats, and what is the 3 major economic security risks for Japan?
Well, that's a good question. I've been thinking about the U.S. mostly. Well, cybersecurity certainly, I think, would be one. We've seen reports of certain vulnerabilities and challenges. I think through the national security strategy from late 2022, the national defense strategy here in Japan, there is going to be more money and attention and legal authorities applied to the cybersecurity mission. Exactly how that comes together is still a question, but I think that's a good direction to move in. You have to believe that supply chain would be very high on the list as well. We've seen just what happens when there are, floods in Thailand, or the earthquake, tsunami in 3/11, or other types of disruptions, and what that can do to the economy. But the question is, which industries or which supply chains? So that gets to this assessment piece of really understanding where the choke points are on that front. In terms of, I'll just say maybe, I think Japan has great technology and innovation capabilities and capacity, but sustaining that and advancing that is going to continue to take more investment and attention. And I think here the collaboration piece is important as well. So the talent pool, the workforce in this arena, we don't necessarily have to think about it just as a national resource. It could be an alliance resource as well. And in Arizona, I know with the TSMC plant out there, they've really suffered in terms of the talent pool, and they've had to bring in a lot of people in from Taiwan to help, and through the subcontractors to make things happen. So it takes a while for the people to follow the opportunities. So maybe I would put innovation and workforce up there. I don't know. Good question, though.
Thank you. Maybe the next is then final question. Especially from the companies or the business point of view. Could you please give practical advice to Japanese companies dealing with economic security issues? Of course, they may intensify they should intensify their lobbying efforts in Washington, for example, in general. But if you have more, any practical advice to them, especially in my opinion, how to, make the risk assessment or the supply chain analysis, and to minimize the future, bad impact causing from the geopolitical tensions, and also how to maximize their sales and profit, using opportunities in the economic security area.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good advice right there, and I would encourage it in a public-private context, right? So it's working with government and with other companies, because I don't think one company by itself can truly understand or do a comprehensive enough risk assessment, given all the different components. So industry associations or working with the government so companies can provide information maybe without their companies being specifically mentioned, or that there's a group that can collect this information and then share the benefits of that assessment with all the companies that participated. So in some ways, my practical advice might be to develop new alliances or some types of alliances with government agencies and other companies, maybe who are your competitors, but also, and they could be companies in other countries. So it could be some US and Japanese companies together that are, even if they're competitors in one realm, they have shared interests, and they're in the same boat in the context of certain economic security challenges. So that type of collaboration in development of these assessments could be very useful. And certainly if you can have an office in Washington or visit Washington frequently, come see us at Sasakawa, USA. Or even using virtual connections, but staying informed of these geopolitical risks, not just in Washington, but more broadly. It's certainly, you have to invest in understanding these challenges and risks around the world. So it's not just about carrying out your business. It's carrying out your business within this dynamic geopolitical environment that we live in.
Thank you. We had very good discussions, explanations, with you. Unfortunately, the 1 hour is very short.
Oh.
So we should end today. But just as you said, the economic security concept is fluctuating, and lots of stakeholders or the consideration from the military or the political or the economies, as well as now from national point or the business point, lots of things is going on. So therefore, my impression is the very, how can I say that, speedily changing situations now. So therefore, of course, then anyone interested in the what is going on in the U.S., please consult with the Sasakawa USA as well as
Or
Schoff-san,
others, yeah.
or others, or the two, actually, of course, you are welcome to MEDI, and please, listen, connected with the RIETI economic security series. Maybe I had better stop here. I really appreciate the Schoff-san's great contribution today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.